Story 1. Adopt a Corpse. Thank you, townspeople of Rhode. We are very excited to announce our new initiative project AAC, or Adopt a Corpse. This program inspires members of our community to claim the forgotten, the unclaimed, and give them the proper burial they deserve, with the proper funding to make it happen. The crowd erupted into loud, echoing applause. My dad, the mayor, adjusted his tie with a touch of smug prestige, basking in the wall of adoring faces. That this project begins tonight at midnight. He thrust his fist into the air like a revolutionary and strode off the platform. I watched him weave through the crowd until he found me. That was pretty good, Dad. Thanks, Adam. I really wanted to... You don't think it's weird? I cut in. And do you not think people deserve to be laid to rest by a loving family willing to claim them? His eyes narrowed slightly. I didn't answer. Whatever, I muttered, looking away. It wasn't bad exactly. It just made my stomach turn. Still, I figured the professionals knew what they were doing. By the time midnight rolled around, the town square looked like Black Friday at a funeral home. A long line of residents wrapped around the courthouse steps, each person clutching a numbered ticket like they were about to win a flat-screen TV. A banner stretched above the crowd. Welcome to the first annual corpse draft, complete with balloon arches and a snack table. I stood next to Dad as he worked the line, shaking hands like he was personally responsible for every single death in the freezer. Mayor Bradley, I hear you've got a tall one saved for me, called Mrs. Hendricks, the 78-year-old former librarian who once fined me for sneezing too loud in the reading room. Dad winked. All in the paperwork, ma'am. At the front of the line, two city workers in matching polo shirts wheeled out a stainless steel gurney. The sheet over it was embroidered with the town crest. Number 23, one of them called. A guy in a tracksuit jogged up, grinning like a lottery winner. Ah, that's me. He pulled out his phone and started filming. When they lifted the sheet, there was polite applause. The guy shouted, "Look at this handsome boy. We're going to have so much fun together," before helping load the body into the back of his SUV. I glanced at Dad. Still not weird to you? He didn't look at me. Adam, this is civic history. You'll tell your kids about this one day. That was assuming I ever had kids. After watching a corpse adoption draft at midnight, I wasn't sure romance was in the cards. We got our corpse around 2:13 a.m. A white van pulled up to the curb, the kind usually reserved for plumbing repairs or kidnappings. The side read Rhode City Mortuary and Event Services, in cheerful bubble letters, like a funeral had sponsored a children's carnival. Two delivery guys in matching jumpsuits hopped out. One had a clipboard, the other had the gurney. The sheet was a cheery lemon yellow, because apparently nothing says death like pastel bedding. A Bradley family? Clipboard guy asked. Dad stepped forward like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. That's us. They wheeled the gurney right into the living room. Squeaky wheels, announcing every foot of its journey. Your adoption packet's in the envelope, Clipboard guy said, tucking a manila folder under the stiff arm. You've been assigned male, not 48. Mid-40s, probable heart failure, no identifying features, no allergies. No allergies? I asked. He shrugged. Some people like to cook their corpse's favorite meals. Tradition. I decided not to ask what tradition meant. The delivery guys left as quickly as they came, the van rumbling into the night, leaving us alone with him. Dad pulled back the sheet like a magician, revealing his grand finale. Male 48 looked about 50, his skin a little too waxy to pass for living. His eyes were closed, but his mouth was curled into the faintest smirk, like he knew something we didn't. Welcome home, Dad said, as if speaking to a rescue dog. I stayed in the hallway, watching him tuck the sheet neatly under the corpse's chin. When Dad switched off the lamp, the smirk seemed just for a second to get wider. I woke up to the smell of coffee and something frying. For a brief, blissful moment, I thought maybe Dad had decided to be a normal parent who makes breakfast. Then I walked into the kitchen. Dad was at the stove, flipping pancakes like a man hosting a cooking show for the dead. Male 48 was sitting upright at the table, still wrapped in his lemon yellow sheet, head tilted slightly toward the plate in front of him. A plate with pancakes. Morning, Adam, Dad said. We're having a little welcome breakfast for our new housemate. I stared. You made him food? Dad slid a pat of butter onto the stack in front of male nar 48. It's about making them feel included. The pamphlet says so. Builds a stronger emotional bond. The pamphlet also says he's dead, I pointed out. Dad didn't even look up. Don't be morbid. I glanced at the corpse. His head was still angled toward the pancakes, but the sheet around his shoulders had slipped an inch since last night. I could see the edge of a mottled collarbone. Dad plopped a plate in front of me. Eat. We've got paperwork this afternoon, our adoption interview. Our what? Interview. They just check in to make sure he's adjusting. We'll need to take a family photo. I looked at the corpse again. Somewhere in the stillness of his face, that smirk was back. The adoption office smelled faintly of bleach and cinnamon rolls. A bad combination. Dad sat beside me in the waiting area, flipping through a glossy brochure titled Making the Most of Your Corpse. Male No. 48 was parked in a wheelchair between us, sheet draped over him, like he was a very ugly parrot cage. A woman in a red blazer stepped out from behind a door. The Bradley family? That's us, Dad beamed. We followed her into a small interview room, the kind with one plant in the corner and an aggressively cheerful poster of people holding hands. She sat across from us, uncapped a pen, and started flipping through forms. So, she began, how has your new family member been adjusting? I blinked. Adjusting? Yes, she smiled patiently. Has he been included in daily activities, family meals, outings? I glanced at Dad, who nodded proudly. We had pancakes this morning. Lovely. And have you begun discussing future plans? Wait, I interrupted. I thought the whole point was to bury them. The woman tilted her head like I just said something obscene. Eventually, of course, but this is the bonding phase. It's very important for emotional closure. I looked from her to Dad, back to male No. 48, who was still smirking like he was in on the joke. Bonding phase? I repeated, he's dead. We're not taking him to Disneyland. Dad gave me a warning glance. Adam. The woman scribbled something on her form. Some families choose Disney, she said matter-of-factly. Others prefer camping or community events. We just ask that you treat them as you would any beloved family member. I stared at her. So you're telling me I'm supposed to hang out with him until we decide to put him in the ground? She smiled brightly, pen scratching against paper. Exactly. I sat back in my chair, suddenly very aware that male No. 48's head had shifted just enough to be facing me directly. Saturday afternoon, Dad announced it was time for male 048's first day out. I assumed that meant a respectful trip to the cemetery, maybe some flowers, a quiet moment. Instead, we ended up in line at the farmer's market. Dad pushed male No. 48 in a thrift store wheelchair, draped in that lemon-yellow sheet like a ghost that lost its Halloween spirit. He'd even tied a jaunty scarf around the corpse's neck. People waved as we passed. Waved. Oh, he looks wonderful, Mrs. Hendricks called from her jam booth. Such healthy coloring, I muttered. That's formaldehyde. Dad ignored me and leaned down to male No. 48. Shall we get apples, or maybe some fresh bread? We rolled past a guy selling honey who gave the corpse a free jar for being such a good boy. I finally snapped. Hey, does nobody else think this is insane? He's dead. You can't take him on a stroll. He's not a pug. A woman with a stroller turned around, horrified. Don't be rude, young man. They're people, too. They're dead people, I said, gesturing wildly at male No. 48. We're supposed to bury them, not parade them around like bonding phase, Dad interrupted firmly, as if that explained everything. We reached a produce stall, and I watched in mute disbelief as the vendor held an apple up to male No. 48's face. He looks like a gala man, don't you think? The corpse's head tilted slightly toward the apple. Adam was still in yesterday's hoodie, hair sticking up in stubborn tufts, as he slouched at the kitchen table. Across from him, Morgan, his sister, was meticulously peeling the label off a coffee creamer, the way someone might peel skin off an orange. Slow, deliberate, faintly unsettling. So, Adam began, his voice thick with sleep, you're telling me we keep them? Morgan sipped her coffee. That's the program. Like in your house? That's the idea. Adam blinked. I thought we were here to... He pantomimed shoveling dirt. You know, put them in the ground, standard corpse procedure. Not. Pick one out like we're at the shelter trying to find a hypoallergenic breed. It's better this way, Morgan said, calm, as if explaining a recycling schedule. They're unclaimed, no family. This way they get a home. You give them a bed, talk to them, keep them. Company. Adam just stared at her, the silence stretching until he could hear the hum of the refrigerator. So, no burial. Just weekend at Bernie's, but forever? Morgan finally looked up. Don't be dramatic. We're not parading them around. They just stay a while. Adam hadn't slept. He'd tried, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw the corpse's face or lack of one, depending on the angle. He was still in yesterday's clothes, hair a mess, when there was a soft knock at his apartment door. He froze. No one knocked at 5:13 in the morning unless it was a neighbor complaint or the police. He padded over, heart pounding, and cracked the door. It was the woman from the Adopt a Corpse program. Bee standing there with that same unsettling, sweet-rot smile. She had a cardboard box in her arms. "Good morning, Adam," she whispered like they were in a library. "It's visitation day." "I what?" She breezed past him into his house. "You didn't think adoption was just a piece of paper, did you? We connect the living and the dead. You're supposed to bond, build a relationship. The stronger the tether, the smoother the transition." Adam shut the door slowly. I thought this was like a burial sponsorship thing. B was already setting the box on his table. She lifted the lid. Inside was the corpse's head. He staggered back, hitting the wall. "Oh, hell no." "Relax," she said, stroking its hair like a cat. "She's not awake yet." "Yet?" B's smile widened, but her eyes didn't blink. "Tonight's a liminal night, Adam. The veil's thin. You don't have to keep her, but she needs to see where she belongs now. With you." Adam's voice cracked. "She doesn't belong here?" The corpse's eyes twitched open. Story 2, Dare Night. Millie wobbled to her feet, a half-empty glass in her hand. "Okay, let's play truth or dare," she announced, grinning as she sloshed a little of her drink onto the carpet. Max snorted. "What are we, 12? Oh, come on," Johnny said, leaning back against the couch cushions. "It'll be fun. I haven't played since. I don't even remember." "I'm in," I said, raising my glass. The air was warm and familiar, full of the smell of cheap beer and the faint tang of whatever scented candle Millie had lit earlier. The five of us had fallen into the kind of easy rhythm you only get with old friends, half teasing, half nostalgic. We sat cross-legged in a loose circle on the living room floor, trading jabs and laughing as the dares started small. Chug what's left in your cup. Text your ex a song lyric. Wear your shirt backwards. Someone pulled out a Bluetooth speaker, and music trickled through the room, soft enough not to drown our voices. But somewhere in between the jokes, I started to notice little things. The house had a stillness to it, like the kind of quiet you get after a power outage too complete, as if the outside world had stopped moving. The candle flame near the window flickered, though the glass was shut tight. And every now and then, when I glanced toward the hallway, I could have sworn there was movement, just a shadow slipping out of view before my eyes could focus. "All right, next round," Millie announced, grinning in a way that made me nervous. Her cheeks were flushed from the wine, and her eyes had that mischievous glint I remembered from high school. The one that usually ended with someone bleeding or grounded. "I'll go," Johnny said, leaning forward. "Truth or dare?" "Dare, obviously." Millie's grin widened. "Okay, I dare you to. Go outside, run to the old willow at the end of the street, and..." She paused for dramatic effect. "Knock on the trunk 3 times. We all chuckled. "Seriously?" the Max said. "What is this, ghost story camp?" "That tree is cursed," Johnny said with mock seriousness. "Remember, old Mrs. Keeler said a man was hanged there." "Yeah, in like 1890, Millie scoffed. "You'll live." Johnny shrugged and went outside. The sound of the door clicking shut felt louder than it should have. We waited, still laughing, but the laughter faded as seconds stretched into minutes. Finally, we saw him in the doorway again, except he was pale, shivering. "Okay, my turn," Johnny said quietly, sinking into his chair without explaining. "Did something happen?" I asked. Johnny shrugged and took a slow sip from his drink. His eyes found mine. "Alice," he said, voice casual but with an edge, "I dare you to jump in the river outside." I narrowed my eyes. "No way, it's like 30 degrees out there, freezing." The others exchanged grins, and before I could protest again, they started chanting in unison. "Do it, do it, do it." I rolled my eyes, more annoyed than intimidated, and stomped toward the door. The night air bit instantly at my skin as I made my way across the yard, pine cones and needles crunching under my bare feet. The river shimmered in the moonlight, dark and fast-moving. From the balcony, the 3 of them leaned over the railing to watch. "Do it naked," Millie shouted. I shot her a look but peeled off my clothes anyway, more to get it over with than to please her. Without another thought, I jumped. The cold slammed into me like a fist to the chest, knocking the air from my lungs. My gasp came out as a strangled sound before water rushed into my mouth. I kicked hard, trying to break the surface, but something was holding me down. Not a current. Not weeds? Something. Panic surged. I thrashed wildly, my legs connecting with. Resistance. Solid. Human? With a burst of adrenaline, I tore free and clawed my way upward. My head broke the surface, and I dragged myself toward the bank, every breath burning. On shore, I yanked my clothes back on with trembling hands, still dripping. My friends rushed toward me, their faces pale and wide-eyed. "We thought you hit your head or got knocked out," Max said, wrapping his arm around me. "No," I panted, still shivering. "But something's down there, and it felt like it grabbed me." The first few dares were harmless. Millie dared Johnny to text his ex a single word. Moist, of all things. Max had to do his best chicken impression out on the porch, and I got dared to wear socks on my hands for the next 10 minutes. Stupid, ridiculous fun. But somewhere around the fourth round, something in the air shifted. It was subtle at first. Millie's smile looked a little too sharp. The firelight from the candles flickered like the shadows in the room were leaning closer. My turn, Millie said, her voice light, but her eyes locked on Johnny like she was calculating something. Johnny, I dare you to go into the basement. Johnny raised an eyebrow. The creepy one? The one with the door you can barely open? Millie's grin widened. That's the one. And you have to stay down there for 5 minutes. No phone. No flashlight. Pfft, easy. Johnny stood, but I caught the way his hand flexed at his side, like he wasn't as confident as he sounded. We all listened as he opened the basement door. It groaned so loudly it sounded almost alive, and the air that seeped out was colder than it had any right to be. He disappeared down the steps, his footsteps echoing until they faded. Minutes passed. Too many minutes. The timer on Millie's phone went off, but Johnny didn't come back up. Max frowned. Okay, that's long enough. We all went quiet, staring at the basement door like it was going to move on its own. Then, we heard it. From the darkness below, 3 slow knocks. Pause. Then, a whisper. Too faint to understand, but it crawled over my skin like static. Millie's grin faltered. That wasn't me. Then it was followed by a thud. A deep, heavy thud that seemed to echo inside my chest. Boom! The 3 of us still upstairs froze mid-breath, eyes darting to each other in the dim light. What the hell, I whispered. The door to the basement, one we all swore was shut, gave a slow, aching creak as it swung open, the sound stretching out like it was dragging its nails across the air, and then click every light in the house snapped off at once. Darkness swallowed us whole. Guys, Millie's voice cracked, trembling in the black. Something below us shifted. At first it sounded like small things tumbling over a stack of papers, maybe a box. Then the noise grew sharper, heavier, deliberate. Glass clinked. A metal object scraped across the floor. Who's knocking stuff down? Max whispered, his voice so tight it barely existed. Not us, Millie and I said in unison. The noises came again, closer now. Something was moving through the basement. Then a sudden crash, ceramic shattering. Another smash. Something metallic toppled and rolled, ringing against the floorboards. We all instinctively took a step back as the sounds crept toward the stairs. A sharp, dry crack like a bone breaking echoed up from the dark. Something wet dripped. Once, twice. A slow patter hitting the wood. And then, silence. That was almost worse. In the heavy dark, I swore I could hear faint breathing. But it wasn't coming from any of us. The silence stretched thick and suffocating, until suddenly, a cold, wet hand slammed down on the stair railing. Its grip tight enough to leave a chilling bruise. A low, guttural growl rumbled up from the darkness below, shaking the floorboards beneath our feet. Then, with a horrifying snap, something lunged up the stairs. Johnny's pale, bloodied face emerged first, eyes wild and unfocused, gasping for breath, as if he'd been underwater far too long. Get back, he croaked, staggering toward us, clutching his arm where dark, sticky blood oozed between his fingers. Behind him, the basement door slammed shut with a deafening bang, plunging the house into darkness once more. We stood frozen, heartbeats pounding, trapped between the silence and the chaos that had just erupted. Johnny's wild eyes darted around the room, but they weren't really seeing us. His breath came in ragged gasps, shallow and uneven, like he was drowning on dry land. He lifted his arm to show us the source of the blood. A deep, jagged gash stretched across his forearm, the skin torn and raw. But that wasn't the worst part. Beneath the wound, the flesh looked wrong. It rippled and shifted subtly, as if something wriggled just beneath the surface, something alive. Johnny, I whispered, stepping closer but hesitating. He shook his head violently, eyes wild with panic. It's not me. Something's inside. A sudden sickening movement beneath his skin made me jump back. The thing inside him writhed, stretching the skin thin before retreating into the wound. Johnny's face twisted in pain and fear. We need to get help, Millie said urgently, reaching for her phone only, to realize the screen was cracked, dead. The house felt colder now, the shadows deeper, as if the darkness itself was watching us wait for what would come next. The thing beneath Johnny's skin writhed faster now, pulsing like a heartbeat of pure darkness. His screams tore through the silence, raw and ragged. Get away, he gasped, stumbling backward, his eyes blackening inch by inch. Before we could react, a shadow spilled from the basement doorway. a mass of shifting darkness that seemed to devour the very air. It moved with unnatural speed, engulfing Johnny in an instant. His scream cut off abruptly, swallowed by the void. We froze, paralyzed by fear as the entity turned toward us, an endless black maw where a face should have been. Eyes like cold pits of nothingness. One by one it lunged. Millie vanished with a strangled cry. Max tried to run but was pulled down with a sickening crack. I was the last, heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. The darkness surged forward, cold and infinite. Just before it consumed me, I saw their faces empty, broken, trapped forever in the entity's hunger. And then nothing. The cabin fell silent once more. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a faint, eerie laughter. Story 3. Thomas had always considered himself a man of reason. He liked schedules, routine, and certainty. Life was manageable in its predictability. But sometimes the universe had other plans. It began on a rain-slicked Tuesday night. The kind of night when the city smells of wet asphalt and the distant buzz of street lamps hums faintly through closed windows. Thomas had just settled into his worn armchair with a book, the soft hum of the radiator filling the quiet apartment. The clock on the wall ticked toward midnight. Then, just as the second hand struck 12, a knock-soft, deliberate came at his door. Not a slam or a hurried bang, but a polite tap, like someone announcing their presence with care. Curiosity pried him up from his seat. He moved cautiously, each step muffled against the threadbare rug. When he opened the door, the hallway was empty. Only the stale night air greeted him. His eyes dropped to the doorstep, where a small, weathered notebook lay. The leather was cracked and worn, dust clinging to its edges. Golden letters faded with age embossed faintly on the cover spelled out, Tales of Misfortune. He hesitated, then picked it up. The smell of old paper and leather filled his nostrils, musty and bittersweet. Inside, stories sharp and brief etched themselves across yellowed pages. Each was a glimpse into someone else's tragedy. A man struck dead by lightning on a clear summer day. A young woman who fell ill with a wasting disease that baffled doctors. A child who vanished without a trace from a locked room. The prose was clinical, detached, almost like an obituary written by someone who knew the deepest corners of human suffering. Thomas shivered but closed the book with a nervous laugh. A prank, he reasoned? Some twisted joke. That night sleep came uneasy. The knock returned the following evening exactly at midnight. This time the notebook sat beside a folded letter, pale and brittle. Beware the path you take tomorrow morning. A collision awaits. His pulse quickened. It was impossible no one should know his daily routine. Still, Thomas tried to dismiss it. The next morning he left his apartment earlier than usual, driving with a heightened sense of caution. When the radio crackled news of a massive accident on his regular route, a chill ran down his spine. He had narrowly avoided disaster. Days passed, and the knocks kept coming. Each time a new message. Some were warnings, friends falling ill, family secrets unraveling, betrayals brewing in shadows. Others were cold predictions of fire, loss, and despair. Thomas became a prisoner of these nightly visits. His world contracted until it was nothing more than his apartment and the door where the visitor left their grim tokens. One night, frustration gnawed at him until he flung open the door as the clock struck 12. The hallway was empty, no footsteps, no figure, only the echo of the last knock fading into silence. Then, taped to his door, a new message in harsh red ink. You can't run from what's coming. The knocking stopped after that. But the dread was no less suffocating. Sleep deserted him. The familiar sounds of the city, the distant siren, the muffled laughter, the hum of passing cars, faded into a haunting quiet that pressed in from all sides. One morning, a neighbor found Thomas at the riverbank, staring blankly at the water, lips moving in a barely audible whisper. It's here. The notebook lay open beside him, its pages utterly blank.